Hi, I'm Grace Michael, and I chose the piece Cut Piece by Yoko Ono. It is a piece where she is on a stage by herself, and she's wearing a very expensive outfit, and she allows members of the audience to walk up and cut a piece of her clothes off, and then sit back in the audience. And it was performed in Kyoto, Tokyo, New York, and London between 1964 and 1966. So, some background on Yoko. She was born in 1933 in Tokyo. She also moved between Tokyo and the United States a lot with her family. And so this kind of made her feel ostracized from both places because she was bullied in both places in United States for being Japanese and in Japan for liking the US and like spending time there. She ends up marrying a Juilliard graduate and then begins her career as an avant garde artist. And she begins to have very strange performances with very strange titles. Like one was called A Piece for Strawberry and Violin, but the piece was just videos of people doing mundane acts. So it really didn't have anything to do with the title, but it was still very interesting. Some of the principles of art and design that I found very striking were the shape. So I think the shape of the setting that she chose, it being in an auditorium with a stage, is very interesting because it really allows the audience to become a part of the artwork, where they come up and they get to be on the stage and in front of the whole audience, and kind of like perform themselves. And the shape of her clothing. With every person that comes up, they choose what they want to cut off, and with every person, it gets smaller and smaller, and so it kind of tells a different story. And as it gets to the end, she becomes very like vulnerable, and I think in one piece she only had on her underwear at the end. Contrast, I think the sound in the room in the auditorium was very it was very quiet. I read in an article that they waited long periods of time for people to come up and actually go, and so I think the silence of waiting really contrasts with the sound of somebody walking up and getting onto the stage, and the sound of the scissors like cutting the clothes I think would be very striking. And then the movement. She stays completely still during the whole performance. And I think just the movement of her being so still and then the audience member coming up, and they can interact with her however way they want to. And so I think the movement that they choose to make towards her and the movement of what they choose to cut and like sitting back down, I think is very interesting. And so, in one of the articles I read, they said that the relationship between spectacle and spectator is a very big part of the piece because usually they don't have direct interaction like they do in this piece. But for Yoko, she made herself the piece of art, and she allows the audience to become a part of the performance. And so it's like they come up, and I think it's very interesting because she did it in very different places, like in Tokyo, other than like contrasting with New York. Um, and so I think in Tokyo, they have very different customs and traditions on how they treat women and how they see clothing than they do in New York. So in Tokyo, they were very like serious, and they walked up almost ritually to cut her clothes off. But in New York, it was seen almost as a striptease. And so I found that very interesting that it kind of tells about the culture that where she did it. Intentions, I found these two quotes that I really liked about the piece. The first one was, "It creates a social volume that remains precariously open to violence while disturbing it in unexpected ways." And so I took this quote as meaning the audience has almost free range for what they do, For example, in New York, they treated it like a striptease. So there was people that would walk around her very menacingly, and they would cut off very like inappropriate parts of the clothing. But they are also on stage in front of an audience, and so the whole audience can see what they're doing. So I think she's trying to show maybe that kind of violence, but also not every person that did it was like that. Like in Tokyo, they were very serious. And then the second quote: instead of giving the audience what the artist chooses to give, the artist gives what the audience chooses to take. I find this very interesting because she is from all of these places where she performed, and so I think she is giving back to the places, and she's allowing the people to like come up and take what they wanted from her, and I found that very interesting. So um, that was it. Yeah, I hope you have a great day.